Josh and Frankie with a couple of dumb shits. Hello, primates! You found Primus Tracks. Congratulations! Oh, there are so many ways to find us, not just here on this beautiful podcast. We are at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Threads. PrimusTracksPod@gmail.com is the email address. Frankie runs a Facebook page titled Primus Tracks, and you can ask Soya. If you have a question for Tim Soya, all you have to do, leave a voicemail or a text at 337-514-7692. Nobody's going to pick up the phone out of the blue. It's a Google Voice number. It's on Do Not Disturb. Leave a message for Soya. We'll do an episode with him in the coming days. I mentioned him earlier. I guess I should say he is the king of Primus Tracks Towers, all the way up there on the 38th floor. It's Frankie Gerstein.
Hi, Josh.
Welcome back, Frankie. Welcome into 2024, actually, as we record this.
Wow. Hard to believe we've been doing this for 4 years now.
I can't believe you held on that long. I apologize from the bottom of my heart. In fact, I extend that to everybody who's listening. My sincerest apologies to you. But thank you all for sticking around. And Frankie, you keep coming back for more.
Yes, much appreciated, guys.
And as you may have imagined, we are continuing our coverage of Armies on Ecstasy, the 6th track from the Oysterhead album, Grand Pecking Order. But of course, we have a lot to do before we get to that track today. First off, you can support the podcast in myriad ways. You can join the Punch Bowl by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Or, if you don't use that service, which I don't, leave a 5-star review anywhere on the internet. Tag us, email it to us, contact us somehow. We'll read it right here. You can also join Captain Shiner's Yacht with your support of the podcast. I'm glad to send some stickers designed by Frankie, printed by Sticker Robot. You can email primustrackspod@gmail.com for more information on that. And the easiest way to support the podcast, spread the word. Let those ads roll at the end. I don't listen to them. You don't have to either. Just let them roll. We have a lot of miscellaneous debris going into the new year, Frankie. Now, our last episode, we covered Radon Balloon, and this is one of those bizarre moments where I had this realization after our erstwhile contributor, Eric in Australia, mentioned this. It felt like I was searching all over the house for my car keys, but they were in my hand, Frankie. Because Eric said along the lines of, Radon Balloon, doesn't that sound like a reference to Led Zeppelin? I looked in my hand and there were my keys. It was right there in front of me the whole time, and I never have picked up on that in 20 plus years. I don't know about you, pal.
I would never have picked up on that because I'm not Zeppelin versed at all.
But just the names themselves, Radon Balloon, Led Zeppelin, you have an element of the periodic table, a dirigible, and that's your name. So there's many other ones one could do. I think I'm going to start a band called Helium Blimp. Thank you for that, Eric. I can't believe that got by me. It's a good little pun, if that's the intent. Frankie, you have some miscellaneous debris to toss at us.
Yes. First of all, Josh, what's your take on this very interesting interpretation that we received in terms of Sgt. Baker? Well, first, let's backtrack a little. On our Sgt. Baker episode, we said that the ad-lib portion of the track, which is not included in the lyrics, is Les yelling, "Fire in the hole." And I think several of our acquaintances have heard the same phrase. But Qbert told us that Les is in fact yelling 10 hot, in the exact same tone, pitch, and timing that a drill instructor would yell at the end of a march. He said that he heard it so much at boot camp that every time it was yelled, he would instantly be finishing the song from that point in his head. So this is a very interesting perspective. Fire in the hole has always sounded to me like a lot of words for such a brief yell, right? Unless you cram everything together. But I guess it kind of works. But 10 Hut also sounds reasonable. What do you think? Let's take into consideration that Qbert has a military background.
Because of that military background, I will defer to the expert because I have none such experience. And 10 Hut makes perfect sense. We definitely heard a lot of different things being yelled in that moment on that track. But I'll buy 10 Hut. I could have sworn it started with an F sound, the F sound, but...
Same for me.
If you've been in the military and you've heard that screamed at you thousands of times, you definitely have an inside track on that. So perhaps that mystery has been solved.
What does 10 Hut mean?
As far as I know, a cadence to get you started on a march. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I've seen in the movies.
Interesting.
Yeah. So maybe that mystery is finally solved and put to bed. Although, as we know, Les likes to change up what he yells in different portions of different songs. So we definitely heard a Fire in the Hole on a live version, as far as I recall. But this episode, you're talking about an episode we did so long ago, Frankie. Isn't that wild? I have no memory of what we talked about. So
it's from our early days, very early days.
Early days. And that's why I have no recollection.
Early days, win the maze.
But good night, everybody. But thank you for that contribution. What else you got over there to sift through?
I'm also going to backtrack all the way to our Chocolate Factory discussion.
Ooh.
And you might remember that when we were going through the list of people who have been fortunate recipients of a golden record, we mentioned a certain winner that uploaded a video to YouTube and also provided some information over at Discogs. So I discovered something really fascinating. The name of this winner is Crystal Baller, and she actually had the opportunity to interview Les Claypool over the phone back in 2021. This interview was arranged by Queen City Nerve. So during the conversation, Crystal actually told Les that she won the golden record, and this was a catalyst in her life to begin making some changes and things that she had always wanted to accomplish. And this initiative culminated in the foundation of PML, which stands for Pachyderm Music Lab.
Oh!
It is located in Optimist Park, and it's a music school for children 5 years and up. Crystal teaches children how to appreciate and love music in a very safe, non-judgmental environment. And inspired by her winning of the record, she decided to call the school Pachyderm Music Lab.
What a great nod to an artist that she adores, respects, and was inspired by. And good for you, Crystal, for doing that and doing something for kids and doing something positive for people. You have one of the coolest names I've ever heard. Crystal Baller? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And it's really cool that Les inspired something so positive and so great.
Absolutely. Now, I recall, I think I must have seen something she posted on Instagram a couple of years ago about PML, the music lab, but I was unaware that she was a golden ticket winner. So congratulations and props to you, Crystal, for realizing a dream. How inspiring.
Congratulations, Crystal. That is fantastic.
Beats the hell out of starting a podcast.
And it's really cool that Les is aware of the existence of this place.
Absolutely.
Wow, we are up to our necks in debris today, Josh. But Herb has been quite busy recently. So not only did he have his first opening for a solo exhibition with his artwork, but he's also hosting his masterclass in the next few days, right? I believe it's January 6th.
By the time you all hear this, January 6th will be done and gone. However, Tim Alexander is hosting what he calls Stick Academy, and I believe it's going to be an ongoing service that one can sign up for, in which you get time with Tim to learn his drumming secrets and his approach to drumming and apply it to your own. What? Are you kidding me? What an opportunity.
And as you may recall, Josh, it's not the first time that Tim has offered lessons because a few years ago it was also possible to, I believe it was via Skype, right? That he was offering one-on-one drum lessons.
That's right. He was using Skype for drum lessons quite a while ago, kind of at the inception of that video chat service.
And it was during Primus time off, I believe.
Yeah. Stick Academy is open to anyone. It's not a one-on-one thing, but I do believe that is part of it. So I believe he's got a website, stickacademy.com. So
Yes.
if you have ever wanted to learn from Tim Alexander, now's the time. And you don't have to accost him after or before a Primus show and possibly be shrugged off because he has somewhere to be. So today, Frankie, we're talking about track 6 from the Grand Pecking Order, the Lone album by Oysterhead. This track is called Armies on Ecstasy. And I want to start with this, Frankie. Where does a general keep his armies?
Where does a general keep his armies?
Yeah, what do you think?
Is that a riddle?
Possibly. Could be a bound.
At some kind of base, maybe? At some camp?
That's a good guess, Frankie, but I will tell you that a general keeps his armies in his sleeveys.
Okay.
Armies on Ecstasy clocks in at 4 minutes and 31 seconds. Music by Oysterhead, lyrics by Claypool. Frankie has history.
Premiered at the Paramount in Seattle, Washington on the 21st of October, 2001. Performed during that 2001 tour, and then resurrected for the 2006 performance at Bonnaroo, and then performed at all the 4 dates of the Oysterhead reunion so far, 2020, 2021, and 2022. It is a piece which has always been jammed out and improvised upon during live performances. You'll find that it's usually stretched considerably beyond its duration in the studio version. I would say that when you hear the studio version, it sounds very, the lyrics are almost crammed. It's very full. The narrative, it's really consistent. And when you listen to the live versions, the lyrics become almost sparse just because of how long the instrumental passages are. And it creates a really, really interesting atmosphere. Now, did you know, Josh, that this song was actually inspired by an article from April 15, 2001, titled Military Ecstasy, which Les read, you may have guessed correctly, on USA Today.
Yeah, this was a widely reported scandal. Les just happened to pick it up in USA Today. And if anybody out there wants to search for these headlines and these stories, they're readily available still.
So what is your perspective on the content of I guess we're skipping ahead a little. I don't know if you want to discuss the lyrical content right now. But I was going to ask you about your perspective on this scandal with MDMA.
Well, gee, Frankie, I wonder why Army recruits and people who have been in the military for a while are seeking some kind of, drug or mind-altering chemical that allows them to feel happiness and that they are part of something. And, usually this is a way to escape one's problems, like most any drug is. And ecstasy offers elation and touch. The sense of touch is heightened. And so I can see why that would be popular. The other thing, though, from those articles from that time period, Frankie, was that it disappears quickly from the human system, meaning it's difficult to detect for anybody doing a urinalysis, which we hear about in the lyrics to this tune. So one article I read from 2001 around this time stated that this drug is not detectable after as little as 48 hours.
Yeah.
I guess there's a reason people were taking it. Plus, around the turn of the century, Molly was exceedingly popular. It's about the time I experimented with it in college.
Wow.
And Only did it a couple of times.
How was your experience?
Well, I only did it a couple of times. I think I've talked about it before in this podcast, maybe not. But the first time I took it, I made sure I was in a safe space. A girl I fancied at the time was kind enough to supervise me. What I most recall, Frankie, is that I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and I was continuously rubbing my hands together as though I was applying lotion or something, and it was the greatest feeling in the universe. And I couldn't stop doing this because it was so rewarding. And once again, the senses were so heightened. Everything just shone brighter and felt new. So it was quite an experience. It was right about that time I saw the MTV special about the girl who ate ecstasy every day for a couple of years, and she had literal holes in her brain after a brain scan, and that was enough for me to never do it again.
And we're back to the army topic. From Shadow of a Man, we had like this sort of interlude with Radon Balloon, and now we're back to the military once more.
We've had drugs, we've had the military, now we have drugs and military.
Yeah.
Wow. Les just must have been in hog heaven when he saw that headline and said, I gotta write a song about drugs and the military. I know those two things. So once again, this is not unfamiliar ground, but as we've said before, we do get a different bent to things, another perspective. And this one is quite strange. If you want to go ahead, let's talk lyrics, because they are certainly different.
It's a very worthy song, I would say.
Yeah, and
this it's also notable for the use of the different voices
that
provide narrative.
And it's also the first time we've ever heard Les Claypool try on palace intrigue for size in his lyrics. So for him to be narrating about a king and a queen and a prince and a jester, the whores I understand, like that's Les Claypool territory. They're only mentioned once, but for him to be singing about the Prince of Paradox, the King of Contradiction, the Queen of Mystery, those are kind of highfalutin ideas, and so for him to do this is certainly a departure. It has this medieval bent to it, almost like a theater production, but then you contrast that with The Army's on Ecstasy, and I read about it in USA Today. It's a strange juxtaposition for me. And so the chorus, I think it must have started with that chorus. And then he slammed it together with this narrative about the royalty. So to me, it barely hangs together because, the king does say, I'm going to send my armies out to fight. Or my troops, I think is the word he uses. So there's that one teeny tiny little safety pin holding these two ideas together, and it's fine. But you're absolutely right. It's wordy. Most of the lines, if we take them individually, are about 6 syllables. Said the King of Contradiction to the Queen of Mystery. That's really enjammed, but Les leaves enough room for some enjambment, as he is wont to do. And we've talked about enjambment a lot when we discuss his lyrics and how he structures them, making the most of the space he has when he needs it. Otherwise, he is giving these 6, 7, 8 syllable lines and allowing them to breathe. So the palace intrigue part, Frankie, is really interesting to me with the prince and the king and the queen. So just to summarize, the king, not happy with the prince, he's going to pick a fight with him. The queen is not too thrilled with that idea, passes a note to somebody, which ends up being read by the jester, who she's basically leaking information. Something's about to happen. And then we get this commentary, this spoken word, the price they put upon the heads of folks of poignant views, that part. We get commentary of, instead of going after your enemies, how about you spend that money on clothing the poor? And, of course, the king is caught in a lie, and the village crier exposes him, which I suppose is the media. I don't know if that's the metaphor here, but he's exposed one way or another. So there's some interesting stuff happening here. It's very these are Les Claypool lyrics, but they're unlike most Les Claypool lyrics up to this point.
Yes, they do stand out, not only on the record, but as a whole in his body of work.
And to me, they conjure this, there's this type of animation, and I can't really place it. I didn't look it up. But when I look at Slowinski's art in the liner notes, it does have this vaguely medieval bent to it. And there's this style of animation. I don't know if it's from a particular era, but it always bugged me out. And it was always creepy to me. And Slowinski's drawings actually remind me of this style of animation that was quite often for works that are set in the Middle Ages or the Renaissance or what have you. And maybe it's just because it's so detailed, it always creeped me out a bit. Maybe it was too lifelike or something of that nature. But this just has a bent to me of a medieval tale that would be told in animation, and it'd be really creepy. If that makes any sense. I might be grasping at straws here. But where do you land on this?
In terms of the lyrics, well, I would explain their uniqueness from the perspective that Les is not using characters. I mean, he is, but not in the way that he usually does, right? I mean, he's using characters, but from a completely different perspective, like the way you describe the use of these names. And because he's talking about something relevant at the time or something that is currently happening in terms of the society, I guess that he felt the need to approach the topic in a less comical way, perhaps. You know, that happens sometimes with his lyrics. Like if you take a look at Monolith of Phobos, Oxycoding Girl is completely devoid of any kind of humor. Mr. Right is about a character, and it's quite a humorous song. Oxycoding Girl is completely dark and humorless. And here I would say that you get like really dark topics, like Shadow of a Man, of course. Now we get Armies on Ecstasy. And Les approaches the topic as it is, you know, without any kind of humor or the typical use of characters that we are accustomed to. Perhaps that could explain why the lyrics read this way, which is so different to the rest of his work. What do you think?
Yeah, there's no Bob in this one. There's no Jerry. There's no Tommy. There's no Winona. There's no sturgeon swimming around. There's just these. There's royalty, you know, all betraying one another, I suppose, and that, of course, is something that has happened well throughout history, no matter where you are in the world. But the way he couches it, it's usually in a modern way, but here he is reaching back to the times of monarchy, and that's what is different. I think he's taking a historical perspective of a sort, which doesn't often happen in his lyrics.
And because of lines like the one that you highlighted, the price they put upon the heads of folks with pointed views would be better spent on the children without shoes. Of course, Les stands by these words, so he doesn't want this message to be, you know, kind of contaminated with the perception that it's a humorous track.
Right.
He wants the message to be delivered in a serious way.
Yeah, and there are a couple parts. There's a nice turn of phrase. He dogs me like a flea. The Prince of Paradox. He dogs me like a flea. That's a nice turn of phrase there. The chorus itself, I read all about it in USA Today. That's such a specific reference that you don't often get from him. I really like that second part of the chorus. They stepped up urine testing to make it go away because it's hard to kill the enemy on old MDMA, which on old MDMA is such a Les Claypool line. But that, you know, makes it a little less serious, and and that contrasts with the verses. So it's hard to kill the enemy when you're sitting in the corner going, "This is the coolest feeling. My hands feel like heaven. Oh my God, that gun is humongous. I can't even touch it." You know, so.
And we got these two, like I mentioned, we got these two vocals, which are provided by external guests. So we have the Queen, and we also have, I don't know if you've noticed when you listen to the later portion of the track, we got this narration filling the entire background of the last part of the song.
Yeah, so we have an uncredited queen. I'll rub you down with linseed oil to ease your throbbing head. No idea who that is. And then at the in the last minute and a half or so, we have a voice, which it sounds like Japanese to me.
It is Japanese, and he's actually he's saying the army's on ecstasy, so they say a riddle about it, and you say today. He's echoing less, but in Japanese.
So he's reciting the chorus in Japanese, and there's plenty of hints in there because MDMA, ecstasy, and those those terms remain in English. But the rest of it does sound like and it's repeated. So I always assumed it was just the chorus in Japanese recited over and over.
Very clever.
I would love to know whose voice that is. I would love to know who the voice of the queen is.
And who is the queen?
Yeah. So we have these two uncredited performers. But we also have Les doing a bunch of different voices. His delivery of the chorus is one thing, and of course we'll sample these in a bit. His delivery of the verses are different. In fact, a bit more intense and almost aggressive. And then he kind of puts on his announcer voice for the vocal bridge. The price they put upon the heads, when he kind of is doing his Don Knotts almost, you know. Let's start sampling this tune. There's a lot to talk about. I will say, for me, Frankie, the tune ends after 2.5 minutes. This one is a bit inflated after about the 2.5 minute mark. But I think it was a compromise tune. And the reason I'm calling it a compromise tune is I've been reading some old articles from 2001 upon album release, interviews with Stuart Copeland and Trey and Les and so on. There was some commentary from Les and Trey that when they went into the studio in April of 2001 to record this record, Stuart wanted to make a pop record, more or less. So he wanted these nice, tight 2.5 to 3.5 minute songs. Trey and Les, I wouldn't say bristled at that, but there was some pushback. And as we've discussed before, you have what amounts to 3 alphas in the room. And so there's who knows how much room there is for compromise. But to me, this is what the compromise sounds like. Stuart wanted it to be probably tighter and more brief. Les and Trey, I'm sure, were more comfortable spreading it out and exploring it. And so my theory here is that Stuart said okay to this being 4.5 minutes in exchange for something artsy, something avant-garde, something out of the ordinary, and that's why we got the recitation in Japanese. That's my guess. You know, he said, okay, we can jam it out at the end, but I get something for this. And maybe that was the compromise. I have no idea if that's true, but in the sense of the music itself, it does feel like a compromise because the first 2.5 minutes are packed with all kinds of different things. There's a lot of promise to the track, to me. And then once that voice kicks in at the end, once that voice kicks in 1.5 minutes out from the end, it's nice, it grooves, but it's just kind of hanging out for me. It's kind of hanging around. But once again, my opinions only. But let's hear some parts of this. So we do get a preview of what's to come, of course, in the first few seconds. But then we start with the chorus, which is not what we always get from a Les Claypool pen tune.
So they say, I read all about it in USA Today. They stepped up urine testing to make it go away. 'Cause it's hard to kill the enemy on old MDMA, said the king.
And it's one of Frankie's favorite deliveries.
Yes.
Way up there. Army's on ecstasy. And so in that moment, they're doing this, Stuart's kind of doing this halftime thing. And I appreciate that they do that there because the tune's going to pick up, right? They're going to go back to that double time tempo, not go back. They're going to establish that double time tempo later on. And that's fine considering we get it later. So there's a bit of a payoff. But in this moment, we get a preview of the bass line that's going to underpin much of the track. and we get some atmospheric guitar. We also get those the rest of Radon Balloon, so that sound from Radon Balloon eventually fades. But to me, the drums are really interesting at the beginning and actually throughout much of the track. The drums
kind of ethereal, right? They have this very peculiar quality.
Yeah, and a lot of the reviews I read from the time period of this album's release in 2001, the term art rock got thrown around a lot. This one, if I was going to categorize one of the tracks on this record as art rock, I think this would be the one.
This one and also Will the Spade, right?
Yeah, and as you can see on the video here, I'm sticking my pinky out while I hold my mug here, and this is a pinky tune. This is a stick your pinky out while you sip your tea tune. Speaking of that, when we get into the verse here, 28 seconds into the tune, it gets really art-like, and it's weird to me, Frankie. It's art rock and it's weird, but it's not out there weird. It's
quite accessible.
Yeah, it's weird so you're a Star Trek fan, right? So I'm going to ground this in Star Trek The Next Generation, which was one of the first TV series I watched as a kid that I really glommed onto and made it mine. I was probably 10 or so when I first started watching it. And in that series, when they do weird, it's weird, but it's not weird. It's weird. It's like they're reaching for some kind of avant-garde Dadaist thing and not quite getting there. So it's weird, but it's not weird. So that's kind of where I am with this tune. It's art rock. It's kind of weird, but it's not so far out there that I can't understand or access it. And we get a little bit of that here with this verse.
Yes.
To the queen of mystery, the prince of paradox. He dogs me like a flea, so I'll set my troops upon him and bring him to his knees. When all is said and done, I'll pick a fight with the Chinese. The queen, she stared him long and hard, and then she softly said,
I'll rub you down with linseed oil to ease your throbbing head.
That's so art rock right there. I'll rub you down with... I love that. That's such a great inclusion. But once again, with the palace intrigue, and I think the other thing that just occurs to me, Frankie, is Trey is doing so much atmospheric stuff, he's not locking into a riff, which is something a Primus fan would be used to, from Larry, or the sounds Trey is making aren't the same. They're different. So he's not locking into one thing, and so that expands the palette. Stewart's doing something that's not straight ahead. And Les is doing his signature thing where he gives us a riff, but then lets it breathe. And so it sounds like a whole lot of components that are trying to fit together like some kind of jigsaw puzzle. And they will fit together eventually. But in this moment, not necessarily. I'm going to forward to a minute and 10 seconds where this tune picks up. Drums. So here's a cool shift here. You heard one iteration of Les doing that different lick before I paused it. So they pick up the tempo. I'm listening to the drums there. What Stewart's doing is massively interesting to me. What we're getting essentially two guitar solos, because you have one guitar on each channel, doing different things. And that part doesn't pick up for me until Trey does that wah part. Wow, 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 which is really cool. Les is doing his thing, but this is like a preview for the next go round of it when it picks up even more, especially with what Stu's doing. And so this part gives way to another... we're a minute and a half into the song, and we've gotten so much, and now we're going to get this.
The price they put upon the heads of folks with pointed views would be better spent
Cool
on the
lick.
children without shoes. And when the king condoned the actions of the liar, he forgot to weigh the awesome power of the village crier.
So So we're less than 2 minutes in, Frankie, and we've experienced all this so far. That's pretty cool.
It's all over the place. I love it.
Yeah, and that's I think that's what makes it so artsy, I suppose. And what's funny is I wouldn't call this prog to any degree, but prog is often described as something that doesn't lock into one riff. It builds upon itself and goes in different directions. This one is largely doing that, but I would definitely couch it more in the art rock side of things, if you want to categorize, which humans are wont to do. So with that cool bass lick and Les doing the without shoes, maybe it's because it's so clipped, without shoes. And he doesn't normally speak that way. So then we get into this, we're going to get into the second solo, but there's a nice little build here, and I am going to encourage everybody to listen to Stewart for the next 30 or so seconds.
So they say, I read all about it in USA Today. They stepped up urine testing to make it go away, cause it's hard to kill the enemy on undeniably.
Listen to Trey too. Okay, I'm going to pause it there because you hear Stu go back to that closed hi-hat, so he tightens it up again, but he does some really fun stuff in that period that I just played. Now I'm going to go back to an interview from 2001, Frankie.
Yeah.
So far, the guitar parts sound like Trey, from what I know, and he's doing some things, and there's a couple of parts that grab me. I think there was an opportunity for the guitarist to roar. Trey does it. He's a different cat, so he does a different thing, and that's fine. I wasn't in the room, and I didn't produce the record. And if they had allowed me to produce the record, that would have been the dumbest decision they ever could have made. But they said something. Les said something in an interview around the time of album release. He said that he challenged Trey to play solos and to play licks that would freak out Buckethead. And that became a running gag throughout the recording process. Trey would do a take and Les would say, you think that would freak out Buckethead? And so that was kind of the mindset they had throughout the recording of this, especially when Trey was laying down solos. I don't know if anything so far is freak out worthy. There's a couple of little things that I really like, but isn't that an interesting bar to set? Like, play something that'll freak out Buckethead of all people.
Quite a challenge for sure.
Yeah. Now, does Trey do it? That's up to the listener. But that is an interesting frame of reference, especially when listening to this track, which has a lot of space, especially in the last minute and a half, for Trey to let it rip if he so desires. So I'm going to forward to 2 minutes, 41 seconds. We're going to get the clearest iteration of the Japanese recitation that we can. Our uncredited performer. Stu is doing something cool too. Well, I like the layering too. There's Trey's got a vocal track there. Les has his. There's the Japanese recitation. Stu's really turning it down on the drums, but the kick drum sounds humongous. And then there's some other layering from the guitar. So they're having a lot of fun with that, which I appreciate. Moving forward a few seconds, we get a nice tension and release. So we're going to get a build and release, Frankie. Or I guess as you might call it, the Fish Special. So we're building there, and then Stu goes back to the hi-hat, and so he kind of continues that pattern that he was doing earlier, and it brings it down a little bit, even though that's where Trey's making a really cool sound.
Yes,
That might
I
have
was going to point that out. I've always really enjoyed what Trey is doing there with the guitar part. It's so unique.
Nice and noisy. That might freak out Bucket for a second. You never know. And then we build up to this big release around the 4-minute part. I like that part. That's a nice tension release, and that's a nice freak out part by Trey. And less underneath the do is a nice little accent too. So that fade out part in that last 30 seconds is pretty nice. You know, it's interesting because in that preceding minute or minute and a half, I'm kind of going, okay, they're just letting it ride here with this recitation, and then we get a bit of a payoff in the last 30 seconds. But that's not to say it's a bad thing, but it just seems like a product of compromise.
From a musical perspective, I think we have a really, really great balance of, you know, this very wordy, like we described it, very interesting lyrical composition, but it is backed by an equally complex and interesting instrumental counterpart. From my perspective, the song is really interesting because it never stands still. There are other songs on the record where you have, you know, some kind of breaks or bridges, but Armies on Ecstasy is pretty much relentless, right? I mean, since it begins up until the end, it just keeps building and building. And if it gets a hold of you, it never lets go until it's over. So I think it's a great way to sequence the record in terms of we have two kind of slow burners, right? We have two slow numbers, very atmospheric, and then things pick pace up again with this one. So it's quite an interesting balance because we have, you know, what I consider the centerpiece or the masterpiece of the record, which is Mr. Oysterhead. Then we get to kind of lay back a little with the two following tracks, and then we are back to the complexity in musical terms with this song. I do think that when you read the lyrics on their own, they are, you know, really interesting, very well written, like we already discussed. But for me, the music is what takes center front in this track. They kind of, I mean, at least for me, they even overshadow the lyrics to a certain degree because, I mean, we get a lot of repetition. We have like this very clear narrative, but the music is so compelling and it's so relentless that it kind of gets all of your attention when you're listening to the song. And the song could have been about any other topic. It could have been any other article that Les had read on the newspaper that day, but it would still be a really, really strong piece of music because of the way that the instruments contribute to the general vibe. So that is my point of view. With this song, the music is much more compelling than the lyrics. What do you think?
Yeah, he could be singing about a sale on dish soap over this song and keep my interest. That's for sure. Especially if the Queen is the one clipping the coupons, you know. But there is some compelling. There's a lot of promise in this track, especially in the first couple of minutes. You know, whether that holds up is once again up to the listener. For me, kinda, it does. What I really appreciate though is that it moves, and so these up tempo numbers like Oz, especially live, and Armies, and then later on something like Pseudo Suicide, those ones that move, I just feel like they're all having a really great time when they up that tempo and make it move, you know. And, you know, maybe you have to earn that. Maybe you have to get there Maybe it can't always be 1,000,000 miles an hour. And these guys, definitely aren't from the world of thrash metal, so it won't be. But the idea that they reward us here and there by going up tempo and letting it rock. So that's a reward. And for me, I'm happy when we get there. You want to hear a few Primates takes, Frankie?
Please go ahead.
If you would like to participate in Primates takes, all you have to do is go over to patreon.com/Primus Tracks. Check out all the options there for supporting the podcast. But the one universal constant is I will post, hopefully, well ahead of time. I didn't do it today, but I still got some comments. A Primates Takes thread about the track up for discussion. You drop your thoughts there. I'll read them right here on the podcast. Our resident fishhead Jordan Kahn, Frankie, chimes in first. He says, Les rocks this one with topical subject matter and royal imagery, but the Japanese sets it apart. This track was jarring when released because Fish's recent hiatus was a rumored response to Molly abuse within the scene and even the band. Now, I know nothing of that Fish hiatus.
I know nothing about the Fish hiatus either.
I do know that drugs were part of the equation, as they often are in a hiatus or a band breaking up. But interesting that it was this drug that the Fish heads were abusing and possibly bothering the band themselves. Brooks Delight says, for me, the star of the show is the vocals. During the verse, the melody is fast-paced, but the vocals are enunciated perfectly without a single word feeling rushed. It's a fun one to sing along with, even though I rarely nail all the lyrics. Great point, Brooks. That's not something we brought up for this tune. I know in the past, Frankie, we've talked about how Les's flow is legit, and this is a great example of that. The enunciation is on point. He delivers these vocals, although they sound rushed because he's enjamming them, he does deliver them with precision, and I do appreciate that. This is a fun one to sing along with. Our pal Johnny Perona says it starts off strong, and then it gets into Noodle Land and overstays its welcome. That actually sounds more... that sounds like a truncated version of what I was trying to communicate. Johnny adds, I recently watched a documentary on World War II and learned that the German soldiers did indeed take hard drugs during the war by design. Of course, my first thought was, it's hard to kill the enemy on MDMA. And I have read similarly about this, and not just World War II, other wars as well, that, soldiers were fed a form of speed so that they could stay awake, stay alert, fight longer, fight harder, so on and so forth, and, give themselves some kind of advantage. And our pal Eric on Australia, Frankie, says, at this point, I'm realizing the album goes in waves. 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 4 is how I see the flow between the mellower or fishy tracks and the more Claypoolian cuts. And I assume he's going in order of tracks. So 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 4. I guess that puts us in one of the twos here. So he's pairing this with Radon Balloon. Interesting idea.
Interesting.
We'll see how that stacks up. We'll do the 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 4 dance step on these tracks and see at the end and see if it stacks up for Eric. Thank you, Primatrons, for your Primates takes. It's live cut time. Armies on Ecstasy, February 15, 2020, Broomfield, Colorado. Day after Valentine's Day. So everybody's full of chocolates.
Love.
And love. They're carrying their rose petals with them. That bass sounds fantastic. Cool. Then they drop into it there. But that's a fun intro. They get to play around with each other. And
Yes.
The more I listen to these live cuts that you're providing, the more I realize Oysterhead is a live band.
Definitely. I mean, it's my golden dream to catch them live just because of how great these concerts are.
Yeah. Which is funny, of course, because by their own admission, the first time they performed was an absolute disaster. You give any three musicians who don't really know each other as musicians together, give them 3 days to noodle around, it's probably going to go that way, unless they're exceptional. Let's hear the jam about 3 minutes into this bad boy. Kind of dropped there. That's a really good example of them trying to communicate with each other and figure out where they're going, and listening and reacting. That's an interesting portion right there where it just kind of drops. Can you go?
Not bad at all for their first show in so many years, right?
Yeah, and with those rolls, they just keep doing those rolls, and it's, well, how long are we going to do this? And then it finally resolves. I wonder. I don't know who's leading them there, but they're just like keep rolling it, keep rolling it, keep rolling it. Then the release. Our next one is Scranton, Pennsylvania, home of one Michael Scott in 2021. This one, Frankie, July 3, 2021, Scranton, PA. Is this a festival?
Yes,
Peach
I
Fest?
believe it's the Peach Festival.
Kind of playing the lyrical line there. I really enjoy hearing Stu's contribution through a lot of these jams. You can tell he's just having a blast, playing free.
They're jamming, but they're maintaining a structure, right? I mean, it's still recognizable as Armies on Ecstasy.
Certainly is. And 2 minutes later, we get this. See, they're finding that one now. Funny. Yeah, there's the communication, right? It's nonverbal, but you can hear the
They're
communication.
feeding off each other, totally.
Yeah, that's fun to hear in a live setting like that, to hear them communicating without words. Finally, Frankie, May 1st, 2022, Atlanta, Georgia.
Sweetwater Festival.
Bucket, you freaked out yet?
A common thread, if you notice, between all of these Armies on Ecstasy live performances is the stop-start quality.
Yeah, they really like that stop-start. They're liking the rolls on this, the drum roll type, approach, and I guess that makes sense if your song's about the Army. A lot of rolling drums, a lot of stop-start, a lot of marching. Interesting. And I think we're 2 for 2, maybe 3 for 3 at this point on hearing Trey kind of do the play on his guitar, the vocalization of the chorus, which is so he's keeping it grounded, as you noted earlier. Let's hear one more jam section. Sorry, I have to turn it off because of the envelope filter. I'm kidding. I just thought it'd be fun. I'm kidding.
Now that we're discussing, the sheer power of these live performances, I just recalled I discovered the full Peach Festival performance on YouTube. It had kind of slipped under my radar because there's no mention about Peach Festival in the title, so it's just the date and the name of the band. So when I finally discovered it, I enjoyed the full show on YouTube, and I was kind of taken aback at the end of the show because this is something that I had never... I had seen, I've heard commentary from the audience on various live performances. I've seen some people that record the show and they kind of do panoramic views of the audience, but what happened on this show is totally unique because at the end of the concert, when the lights came back, the guy who was recording the show, he flipped the camera over to himself, and he said, "What a show!" Yeah, and I had never seen anyone do that when they were recording a show. So it was a very nice detail. It was a nice little touch to finish the video, and I think he echoes my sentiment perfectly. I think I would be completely speechless if I saw Oysterhead live.
Well, I can say this, Frankie. Armies on Ecstasy, report to the brig, because you've been tracked. Next time, Frankie, more drugs.
Wow. They just keep coming, right?
They do. Primates, thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next time for more drugs.
And quite an interesting title as well, which I look forward to discussing.
We'll discuss all that and more. Later days.
Willie Mays.